Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Clifford Brooks, and I'm the poet behind the book The Draw of Broken Eyes and Whirling Metaphysics. And I'm on today with William Tribell with Spectrum Radio.
Welcome to Spectrum with your host, William S. Tribell.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spectrum. I'm William S. Tribell, and tonight my guest is poet Charles Clifford Brooks, returning to the show. Cliff.
Yes, it's good to be back, brother.
Yeah, man, good to have you back. And last time you were on, we were talking about The Draw of Broken Eyes and Whirling Metaphysics, and you have a new book.
I do. This year with Big River Books, it's called Athena Departs, and it's a continuation of my life since the first book, and it has been much easier this time to put my thoughts together into paper after the trial by fire of the first book, and the outcome, I think, has been maybe even a little cleaner than with my first attempt.
Okay. Tell us about the connection between the first book and this new one. You hinted at it's a continuation.
It is, being newer to the poetry world, I cleave to those truths that I have found to be self-evident and really hammered home by those I respect, and that being write what you know. And when I'm asked by fans or those who come to my readings or just those who are generally curious about poetry as a whole, write what you know is something that I echo like a mantra. And when I picked up the pen to write the second book, Athena Departs, my biggest concern was, how do I compose something that's not going to leave those who enjoy my work saying, wait a minute, I've already read this.
Right.
And so a lucky side effect of having a book, my first book being two books in one, The Draw of Broken Eyes being the first one, Whirling Metaphysics being the second. At the end, there's actually an epic called the Gateman's Hymn of Ignoratium. When you write a book of poetry that is over 200 pages long, one, I found that people are more willing to buy that,
Right.
as opposed to the standard, we will spend an enormous amount of money to put it in hardback, 62 pages, and then sell it for $25. And, oh, wait a minute, people don't want to spend that much money on that, other than being a much more marketable, practical commodity.
Yeah.
The fact of the book being so long gives me the chance to live new experiences and live a life kind of divorced from writing, not thinking about, is this poetic, is that poetic, to when I sit down and begin writing my second book, I literally have this 2-3 year window of new experiences, new growth to put on paper. So what the readers get to see in stark detail with very little metaphor, if any at all, or no foggy cryptic language, they get to see me develop as a person, but also as an artist.
Right.
So, that's how I kind of get around, because I have read, to me, it's, a good rule of thumb is only write about an experience one time. To me, that's really all that it needs. And if you write that poem fully to encapsulate all that you've felt and heard and tasted within that moment, it's really kind of cheating the reader to go back and try and reword that. And I think that a lot of poets kind of trip into this ideology of, every year I've got to put out a book or I'm going to be forgotten. And in that panic of writing, they're not really living. It's like getting away from Facebook for a second. If someone says, well, I'm sorry I didn't post those pictures on Facebook, I'm like, no, dude, that's cool. Go live life.
Right.
So it's really the experience that, again, that I've been able to have with that leniency of having a longer first book that's allowed Athena Departs to be its own self.
Right. And first time you were on the show, we discussed it. You mentioned earlier just now about being new to poetry, and The Draw of Broken Eyes and Whirling Metaphysics was your first effort, and like you say, you were relatively new to the art, if you will. Yeah, and that book was nominated for a Pulitzer, and still on the shelves, still selling, still out there. And what was that like after that? What was the pressure? Was it different? Like, you know what I mean? Starting to write Athena Departs. were you feeling different? I don't. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. I do. It's fun. I mean, as much as I would love to tell you that everything I've done in the art world with poetry or with the business side of things has been meticulously handed down from on high and then carried out with full flair on my side with my hands on everything, that's simply not the case. The big things as far as like how the book's composed, how it's put together, designed, how the story is told within those, yes, absolutely did I have both hands in it. But and you hear this from, I guess, everyone who finds themselves in my position, that I never, ever in a million years thought that I would be nominated for the Pulitzer in Poetry or Georgia Author of the Year or the Push Carts Awards that have come from the individual poems within. I literally had a girl I was dating at the time call me 3 years ago and say, I'm so proud of you. And I'm like, well, that's awesome. Why? Because I'll take that at any turn. But she said, then that's when she let me know about the nominations. And now, on the other hand, I never wanted to sound like I just airhead skipped into this, because with the nominations and the appreciation and the from peers and then the invitations to read with other poets at events and at colleges to lecture, I never forgot why I loved doing it. And that's the same memory, the same hard recollection that I took into Athena Departs. I think maybe if I had won one of those awards, that pressure for your sophomore release would have been far more present. But the nominations, of course, again, are huge to me. But what I channeled in me and when I made my singular thought was that if I let this make my head bigger, if I think that I need to write differently now, if I think that I need to compose something that sounds more scholarly or country, or in changing the way I sound, will immediately push away my fan base and those who adore what I do, that feel my adoration in doing it. So I guess what shook off any kind of nerves I had was that all I've got to do is keep doing what makes me happy. And that being a rule of thumb with those who believe, well, I'll get a job I hate and live a life that I hate. And from that hatred, I'll somehow drudge up some sunlight to pass my book and my writing and my skills far ahead of the others, when all you do is end up hating your life. And then all you do is then write about, dark days and find yourself in this little Poe shell of misery and whining, which has been done, brother. It has been done. So
it's its own genre, isn't it?
It is. It has been. It's like the little emo sad. And again, it's to bop in and hear about Poe talk about Lenore or the Raven, and that's fine. But after a while, that's kind of like the same you feel with Bukowski, and like, dude, there's only so many times you can talk about being drunk. There's so many times you can talk about hell. There are nuggets of beauty in all of these things. But what I've seen is when I look back on those who were miserable as this misery enhancing art. And that's great because we all feel it, but to branch out and say, today I feel good. Today I'm listening to this song. Today I think that I'll take a nap, to encapsulate those other small experiences is vital.
Right. Well, speaking of songs, let's take a break. Maybe you'll read something for us when we return.
I will. I'd love to.
All right, welcome back to Spectrum. I'm William S. Tribell, and tonight my guest is poet Charles Clifford Brooks, and we've been discussing your latest effort, Athena Departs, and we were sort of discussing the making of, I guess. And would you read something for us?
I'd love to.
Right.
This is, as you said, from Athena Departs, and this poem I wrote after a relationship. There are far more poems in this book about my attempt to get back out into the world, to break free of a really hermit-like existence, to try and feel with others. And with that came the attempts to maybe stoke something of the romantic nature, which has created some beautiful moments and some moments that left me not jaded, but just stronger. And in this poem, I have started to see someone and found myself in a situation where she felt that we were a bit deeper than we were, and that I think we've all been there, where there's more of a tragic nature on their part, and when they break away, it's not that you were cold, but kind of thinking, well, I want you to be happy, and I'm going to be okay. Sure. And so I kind of put that all into a longer poem that many people see and have liked in my verse, that I tell a story, and there's usually a traveling type motif there. This one is called In the Beginning. In the beginning, there were two calloused hearts. Early dawn brought distraction, labor, a lack of luster pharmaceutical companies adore. Last night saw black dogs, heard the gasps of a panicked child, and struck dumb the boisterous voice. But at noon you said, get over here and drive me. And I spent hours with you, lost, boozy, knowing you were thinking of someone else. We sped in a thoroughbred until tears were chased behind the moon. Gordon, calmest of man's best friends, took us to the river by a path of wildflowers hidden behind a low stone wall. We sat near a spot turtles stopped to sun. Do you need your little notebook? No, I don't. The supper we shared was served by a Lebanese man sporting bad teeth and good Mexican food. Our new evening got topped off with tequila and kisses. You said, I like you too much. I don't need to feel this affectionate blood. Remember that there are others. That fine, dark-haired, frightened one. My days are a malady, or I am thrown asunder in time. I do not know the day. I am not aware of tomorrow's appointment. You see, in the face of all evenings, kin to our memory, I am cognizant of only this encounter, this football game, the breath before I leave. Remember how I said before, as I do now, I have grown beyond wanting anything from you in the beginning.
Excellent. All right.
Thank you.
And that is from Athena Departs, and that is out on Riverboat Books, right?
Yes. We're setting the publication date for September of this year with the anticipation that we can have it out a little bit early, but Peter Damon Bellis, who runs Riverboat Books, is a consummate professional. And let me say now, as I have before, that I think flattery and empty words and pandering always fall that way. And whether you're doing it on Facebook or in your personal life, always strike a sour note, I think, with the public. So with saying that, and the reason I do is that, especially like with Peter, when he and I started talking about the book, and it's not about whether or not he wanted to publish it or he told me how smart he was. We spent the first, I think, 3 hours of our initial phone call just talking about the nuts and bolts of publication and how the machine actually works, that to have an organic relationship with your publisher beyond just a friendship, but to always keep that professional edge with the product, that man has left me absolutely beside myself with not the praise, but just the practicality
Right.
If someone comes to you and says, we're going to make $1 million with this book, unless they have a ironclad how they're going to get you there, really stand back and say, what do they want from me?
Oh yeah.
And with Peter, he's one of those that, with those who also have work, you included, William, who would want to send their stuff to somebody I know would actually do them justice and take time to see them as an individual and read their work to know you. I just can't think of anything better than Peter with Riverboat Books.
Right on. And it's a daunting task, and all those, like what you're talking about, is very valid issues with seeking publication, small press, large press, whatever, making sure your book is available. All these
Right.
things, and it's gotten very. Let's say with the internet access, and we speak about this on Spectrum all the time with artists and musicians, and how the internet has bettered us artists in general and made it easy to contact, communicate, and all that. But at the same time, it's made it harder in the sense of the amount of artists and publishers and producers. I mean, it's just a brave new world, isn't it? A sea. It's a sea of choices and decisions, and yeah.
It truly is. It's the one thing that I have completely shucked off is saying, isn't that weird?
Yeah.
What a coincidence. Because like meeting you, like meeting Peter Restuccia, like meeting Felinio A. Siriano, like meeting anybody that I've met from coast to coast, from right down the road to, California to other countries, you and I have witnessed it, and so have I with almost every single other person let's just focus on Facebook, that we have somehow met the same people, come to respect these same men and women, that we have no way to explain how out of the thousands upon thousands that are on that one website that we've all found, that we've all come to deeply respect. I mean, time and time again, someone said, you really ought to check out the work of this person, and I'll just sit there breathless, and they'll say, what, do you not like them? Or what, is there something bad? I'm like, no, how do you know them? How will we both come to meet them? That experience has been what I have found with publishers, with real spine, real plans, real practical business sense, and then the artists that are the same way.
Right.
It's the sentiment that really drove home the need in me to create what became the Southern Collective Experience, is a umbrella to not name and pigeonhole people, not to have people beholden to a group or a system, but really a haven where people who I have found feel that they're loners in a world that makes us feel that way can not be babied or pampered, but be themselves and be direct without worrying, am I hurting their feelings? Am I hurting this person's feelings?
Right.
But the internet has, in a very real way, opened up the doors to the exposure when you really pay attention to what people are saying or how they ask for help or who they're related to, and not just a sense of blood, of course, but just on the business level as well.
Right.
You can see again, firsthand in real time who they're dealing with and how they project themselves. Do they sit there and puke up all of their minutia of their daily life and how they go to the bathroom, or hey, here's a photo of my lunch, or are they out to make enduring relationships? And that's something that if you pay attention, that you can pick up on and revel in.
Sure.
With others on the internet. And you have publishers too.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, let's talk about the Southern Collective Experience. That is a group you started since we last spoke. Why? Tell us, let's go back to the beginning of the collective.
About 10, 12 years ago, I sat down with some friends and we were talking about the writing world, as writers are apt to do. And I've always made it a rule to be around people who are generally positive, people who are loyal. I mean, these things kind of go, with anybody's life. But when I started talking to folks about, what can we do to make the artist's world demand the respect that every other vocation has? And I thought, it would be neat if, just for my sake, just for the personal sake, and again, what it became, being so far beyond anything I could have planned, all I wanted originally was a reading room, a group where folks who didn't want all the time, and people who didn't expect a payback every time, people who wanted to just have a conversation with other folks who had done the deed, not are going to, not plan to, not hope to, but in some real world way.
Right.
Had set their own goals, had met those goals, and then continued to work. One of the things that I have found the most astonishing today is that when I'm invited to colleges to lecture on poetry and how it's relevant today, I have more business students in the class than I do poets and artists of our genre who want to know how this idea, this seminal spark that happened over a decade ago, became the business, the corporation of the Southern Collective Experience, when originally, and what I tell them is that you do it because you love to do it. You take a practical business model and you find people who want to work with you. Right. And then once I'd laid down the idea and I'd talked to a few friends, and again, along the way, you have those who, just like any vocation, those people who have, oh, tomorrow we're going to get up, we're going to change the world, and we're going to, like, look, let's not change the world. Let's just do it one step at a time and see if we can get a group together that can play nice and be loyal and help each other out because we want us to get ahead. And it took 10 years, as really you see with any business, again, not realizing business is what I was heading towards, was that you stop and you do research. So I did about 2 years of reading and speaking and talking to those who had been in the game much longer than I on what things had worked and what things tragically didn't.
Yeah.
And I found that you pull in a bunch of folks with no set idea on how many women, how many men, how many ethnicities, how many religions. You just go for the work itself. And what I came out of this, really, it was extremely stressful at times, but all good things are. But really a marvelous reaction to this has been this beacon to not save the world, but hey, here's a group that does want to do better and do well by others, by themselves, does know how to work as a team. And in that process, I found, well, why would we only want to have poets in here? Why don't we have prose writers, essayists, fiction writers, photographers, those who do other kinds of visual art, those who are into music? Because the only difference between poetry and songwriting is the hook, is the chorus. And out of that, we have come to this beautiful new place in 2016 where out of all of this work, and again, having members of the team say, hey, I know this other member, why don't, would you mind looking at them? Well, yeah, let's look at them, and then right. Having them understand, then they, once you get the group there, you realize, well, I don't want to make this thing too big because the center won't hold. There's that old adage. And it's not a control thing, but it's how do you create a family that then begins to sprawl out too big. So the first step I'd made, which again, with my personality, I don't really like rules too much, but then I realized we're going to need some rules.
Gotta have some, yeah.
Yeah, some construct there, and really it all comes down to very basic principles that I'm sure many people just have in their private lives, like, no backstabbing. Competition always keeps us on our toes, but no needless, petty, backbiting, spiteful competition. I'm better than you kind of stuff.
Right.
No, no hard drinking, no hard, drugs, no, because that never goes anywhere positive. You never hear somebody say, well, I picked up heroin and then I got a PhD. Never. It's not being judgmental at all, because again, in my early 20s, and I dealt with that in my first book, I had a huge issue with alcohol. And just from a first person experience with that, I had to, again, not trying to be a dad, but, we get together in these small groups, and we took some time off of that last year as we got the structure and the like I said, the construct down of the collective. But right. Starting this year, we're going to start having pods, as it were, where we meet in different places, just first and foremost to sit back and shake hands. And I wanted to have my own family of loyal folks, not to me, but loyal to the idea and to each other. And that's really been in a very beautiful way what's come to be.
Well, and since the conception of the collective, there's a magazine, the Blue Mountain Review, and the Collective Sessions was just released. What is that?
The Blue Mountain Review, is a journal that came out of the group where we kind of sat back and said, well, again, this being so far from anything I could have hoped to do, to have the people and the resources and the time after getting it all set up, to having people step in and take over, putting their stuff on the different pages, uploading on the website, to them having the breath and the room to say, well, let's try a magazine. Do we have something to really add to the world? And branding and the motif that we're trying to create here, many people believe that because the name of the group is the Southern Collective Experience, that it has to be exclusively those from the American South. And that's just so myopic that it would be ridiculous to try and to trap it that way. Right. Even though I'm very proud to be Southern and would live in Georgia more than anywhere else in the world, I would love to travel and have traveled. And in that, especially with my moving around and getting to know people with that same idea of laid back, New Orleans, Athens, Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina, this very, laid back, how does Led Zeppelin play the blues? How does the Black Keys from Akron, Ohio play the blues? The blues sound out of Chicago. There's this laid back, easy Dixie feel that we want to encapsulate that's from everywhere.
Right.
It doesn't, people have said to me like, well, Cliff, I'd love to submit to this magazine, but I don't sound like you. And I'm like, good, that would be redundant.
Right.
So the Blue Mountain Review has been, again, we started out the very first issue primarily with people from within the group, because when you submit to magazines, generally, people get so uptight and heartbroken when they're rejected. When I tell people not to pander, but how do you know that this person who's the editor to the prose or poetry or photography, music section of this magazine has any real knowledge of the subject? This could be somebody's second cousin that they just let on to make them feel better.
Absolutely.
Well, with the first issue of Blue Mountain Review, I wanted the people to read kind of our background and where we come from, and that we are human, and by all means see, well, I don't really think that line works. I don't see how they use that comma right. That allow them to kind of dig in and have their own perspective and keyhole into who we are. With the second issue, which comes out the first week of February or the second at latest, we have Dan Veach, who won Georgia Author of the Year in poetry and runs the Atlanta Review, and is a amazing human being. Just one of the most humble folks you've ever come across, and yet has met everybody of notoriety. And just he's like this zen. I come in like a hurricane, strapped on the back of a typhoon, and then there's Dan Veach, who's very soft-spoken and very chill. And so there I am, kind of like a firecracker in your hand. And so the next issue has 3 small features. Michelle Roberts out of the Midwest, and then we have Tyler Lee Frush, who's actually right here in my backyard, as well as William Wright, who is a poet of amazing talent. And the poetry that we've drawn in from the public, this being 98% those not in the group, has absolutely floored me.
Excellent.
When you create something to kind of, steal from Field of Dreams, when you build it, they'll come. And I know that's kind of hacked by now, but it really, when you build something, people think about, how do we market it? You produce something in action that people see that they want to be a part of. And then you have a very strict rule of, as I did starting the collective, don't be just nice. And I'm doing my quotation fingers, just nice. What I mean by that is the first episodes of American Idol, where you have those people come on. It's the only episode I watch where they've got those awful people that just make your ears bleed. They're so terrible.
Oh, that's the best one, yeah.
They're not all crazy. I mean, they're not all. Some of them have this look of dismay and shock. Like, no, I've heard from everybody that I sing like the angels. No, you sound like a bat wing caught in the turbine. Just people were nice and said, "Oh, get on that TV and in front of the whole nation and make an idiot out of yourself." I've looked up nice in the dictionary to make sure that it still meant what I think it means. But when I've heard it said, well, just be nice and let them into the group, it's not the idea that I want to put folks down, but it's those folks who, again, maybe just didn't fit the motif. It just didn't fit the idea. That they may have real talent, but if they're not right there, if they need some more practice, if I'm just nice, if the group, again, we having a board now that we vote, it's not just from Cliff's mouth, but we look at these folks and where they've been. If we let somebody in who's not quite there, when the public looks at the work, that person will stick out like a sore thumb. It'll be much more of a disservice and much more mean to them than letting them in. It's the same with the magazine. And then again, you let in a piece that's not quite there, then in the magazine, it's nothing that will make us look bad per se, but that it'll shine on them as, well, what are they doing in that magazine?
Right, right, right. And the collective sessions, this is an interesting, well, I guess a publication, yeah?
It is. Actually, the collective section, the sessions, we sat back at the end of last year in 2015 and thought, it would be a really cool, in action, real time idea to have monthly reading groups. And that's where it started. And then I put in there, I mentioned in a Facebook post, it's Facebook again, in a very useful way, that we were going to have within our groups, within these readings, at the end, we were going to sit down. Again, if people from the public, they're welcome to read or play, show their art. But at the end, they could watch us sit down, the group, the those in the collective who were able to be there, and kind of critique our work. And I've rarely seen in other readings, I've never seen people, they meet month after month after month after month, but no one ever, and it's not to tear each other down. That's the other side of it, is that the public, can watch from afar how you do need to sit down and talk about your work, but then how you can critique their work in a fashion that's just not punching them in the teeth.
Right.
And I had a request from 3 magazines within 2 weeks on coming to their radio show or coming on, in their magazines with an article on how we were breaking strides and creating new grounds in verse and art by having this one little addition of a critique, a creative, constructive critique at the end. And we decided to call them the collective sessions, because it's not just going to be poetry. It'll be music. It'll be a festival more than anything else, because not to be derivative towards my own art, but if you call it a poetry reading, people are not going to come because they have a very
you'll have
negative
a very streamlined response. So you're not going to draw the public per se. You're going to draw people interested in poetry, and that's it. It's very limited.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you have it in places where we want to move it around, have it in different cities, have it in different towns, have it in different states, where we go sit down, and we would love the idea of having people leave and go, I don't know what that was, but it was awesome.
Right on.
And that, they come in and sit down, and they can look around the walls and have, the visual artists have their stuff hanging there. We can have, have musicians come in, really by and large acoustic acts that would play in between readings. People who were, again, bring in folks who knew how to tell a story, that don't just read it off the page like this as if it were a speaking spell, but people who do the motions and the voices and tell stories, to make it an event where people can say, you know what, I do something like that. And then the next month find out where we're playing, where we're performing, and then come and read their own stuff. Again, being open to the public and having them bringing in being a very integral part. Excellent. But the graduating next step to the collective sessions was, with the publication, is with much bigger venues who would like to put on festivals. Excellent. Or have the team come in. They can literally have, for lack of a better term, like a menu of, okay, we have this kind of venue. Maybe it's a winery, maybe it's a brewery, maybe it's a nursery, maybe it's a bookstore, independent or large. They can say, we're really kind of this sound or this kind of genre of verse or prose, where they can look with links to all the members in the collective to literally pick the show they want.
Interesting. Very cool.
I thought that was kind of a neat turn on things, that, don't have the show happen to them. Let them choose and see what they want to bring on with them.
Right. Oh, that's neat. That is new. That's very new. That's different. Absolutely. Well, let's take a break, and we'll be back with Charles Clifford Brooks. Welcome back to Spectrum. My guest tonight is poet Charles Clifford Brooks. And we were just talking about, before the break, the collective and possibly coming shows. And where and when can people see you live and in person?
Those we're setting those up now, actually. And in the winter months, I tend to pull back and do much more editing
Yeah.
with my new book, getting in with Athena now. But the new schedule for my performances will ramp up in the spring.
Excellent.
Here in the South, the cold sometimes, as it does with me, keeps me in the house.
Oh, me too. Me too.
Yeah, until the temperatures until the temperatures get up to at least a tolerable level.
Yeah.
So right now, I don't have anything on the schedule,
Okay.
but I will starting in early March.
Well, speaking of Athena Departs, you got something else to read for us?
I do. This one is to my mama, and in the first book,
Excellent.
I dealt with much bigger ideas, much bigger events in my life, and wasn't ready, as dramatic as that sounds, to write about people like my dad, my mom, my grandfather, people who really had a huge impact on my life, as in many people's lives. But one of those people that has kept me on the straight and narrow and kept my faith in my work alive is my mama. And I wrote her a poem in this one called Promise to Mama, and I dedicated it to a best friend and collective member named Chris Davis, who recently lost his wonderful mother. But this poem is called Promise to Mama. You told me Tuesday it's time to simmer for my heavy mind's sake. A son shouldn't be so good at making his mama's heart break. Now, I won't say how I got lost just yet, because hell is listening for me to spill my secret. Don't go blaming bad luck, because a restless soul is my undoing. I'm overdrawn at the Bank of Legion due to the price of a few sinister seasons. So I sing spirituals and think of sermons I've missed. There's a debt to deal with from damage done to my wrist. Yet, the scars ensure I don't misplace the memory of your undeserved sorrow. You won't weep in the rain again, Mama, and my veins will be clean tomorrow. Saint of a self-destructive son, you instinctively let my hide slide. But I shall not. I cannot. When I sit down with my misdeeds, it's obvious all I'm going to do is fall short of a picket fence, the wife of a quiet life, and you. Promise to Mama.
All right. Wow, that was very deep.
Thank you.
So this book, perhaps more introspective than the first?
It is.
Yeah.
I learned with the first book that sometimes the editing is far more painful than the initial composition, and I think it's because to be in place in that spot, in that moment, you really have to relive it. I learned with the first book, with the edits, and again, I edit meticulously. Again, that in itself being its own art, and Writer's Digest had me come on midway through last year and write specifically on how I edit. And to me, again, you have to relive that moment. And there were poems that I had from my early 20s, mid-20s, where I thought I had dealt with those issues, that putting myself back in that place actually showed me that I hadn't quite put those demons to bed. So with Athena Departs, with that practice under my belt, it was really a much more smoother transition throughout Athena, but it is far more deep into people and instances and in specific events that in some ways I just wasn't ready for in my first book.
Right.
So it does have a much more, you feel I think you can feel me and see my fingerprints much more on this book than in the first.
Excellent. So Athena Departs will be out soon this year,
Yes,
and The Draw of Broken Eyes and Whirling Metaphysics, still available, still out there, still selling.
it is.
How cool is that? The life of a poetry book isn't usually so long. is the
No,
best way to say it. Yeah, it's just
no,
that's part of the rule to be broken, isn't it?
it is. And like I said, I mean, I wish I knew, I could say I knew when I set out that I was doing. It ended up being this 200-page plus book, and then the realization that many people say that there's just, and I'm not trying to say that it's not important and that it doesn't feel wonderful, but people who are so wrapped up in saying I'm published,
Yeah.
well, that's fantastic. But then they get published, and I've seen time and time again this disillusionment of hope when they say, well, "Where's all the fame and money?" It's not that it's not in the arts; it's that you have to apply again that practical, real sense marketing. Don't put whole poems of yours on your Facebook page, because why are people going to go buy your book if you're giving away your work?
Right.
Right. And again, it's like, well, it's not all about money. No, but it's on that same token of this is the only vocation where when you find some success, you'll have some Nimrod come out of left field and say, don't you feel like a sellout? And William, I don't know if you go to work for free, but I don't. Now, again, it's the whole idea of reconstructing how Americans see work, and that it's something that you've got to hate.
Well, hey, that's something really relative to the arts in general. I would say, especially now that you bring it up to poetry, music, definitely. And the first time it happens to you, it's one of those moments, isn't it? It's like you have to make a reality check. You have to stop and be like, wait a minute, was he right? And you have to, the first time it occurs to you, or happens to you, you have to analyze it. And it's sort of like one of those monumental moments, if you will. It's like coming of age, isn't it? Addressing
really
that. Do you know what I mean? Like addressing that when that happens to you the first time, when somebody accuses you of selling out for succeeding.
Exactly. And honestly, I think a lot of it, as far as, the truth that God doesn't give you anything that you're not ready for. If I had gotten this in my 20s or my 30s, I would have become an absolute cliche and overthought everything and thought I was a tragic mess. But at 40, I'm just kind of like, that's cute, man.
So you didn't cute. When you got nominated for the Pulitzer, you didn't run out and buy a beret.
No, nor did I get a scarf and wear it with like a T-shirt. Right, I didn't do that either. I didn't feel like I need a avant-garde new series of photos that make me look totally serious and smart now. It's what people enjoy that puts you where you are is that same kernel of truth that you have to maintain in order for people to still care, even as you grow. You can't, write the same thing over and over, but it's that same soul, that same childlike wonder, really kind of tapered by a practical business mind that, and then again, like with the collective, to surround myself with people that if they or I stand up in public and say, don't you know who I am? These are the people that will take you outside and beat you with a pipe. And as they should, on both sides, as I would for them, as they would, it's to have people around you that not only support you from a real, genuine place, but at the same time will say, dude, you're kind of acting an ass.
Right.
And then we being people who are adults enough to go, you know what, you're right. You wouldn't be saying that if you didn't care about me.
Sure.
It's that kind of communal respect that started the radio show that, began with WYYZ 1490 AM, the Croc here in Pickens County, Georgia, but then got picked up the end of last year by WUTC in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that's affiliated with NPR.
Excellent.
The show is called Dante's Old South, and it's really this linking of the same stuff that you'll see at the collective sessions with, members of the collective reading, performing their musical acts or reading their stories, and then bringing in those from this area that maybe just need that one push to be heard. Because, William, you feel it the same as me, that art now, the whole expression of it, from music to the novel to the book of poetry to the reading of these and the playing of these, there's a void there. And I see it and I feel it with poets and prose writers and musicians that are taking it back to the blues and to old school Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash, and, blues, Robert Johnson, really stripping away all the noise to bringing art back, not to some wonderful place, but to where it is now, using those tools that perpetuate it with beauty and strength.
Well, or like in a modern term, rebooting.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I say it often on here, a renaissance. I truly believe it. Let's take a break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Spectrum. And if you're just joining me tonight, my guest is Charles Clifford Brooks, and we've been talking about poetry and art. Your latest, Athena Departs. And you want to read something for us?
I would love
Got
to.
something? Yeah?
I do. One of the things that I found out that I did well by happenstance, really, and it feels even corny to say it, but erotic poetry. I feel like that I need to address this now. And again, it came out of nowhere at another radio show when they asked me about it. I was like, this is not 50 Shades of Grey. I'm not trying to. It's really in my experience. Again, sexuality, sex itself is something that's beautiful. It's a gift, and I've always treated it that way without elevating it to some haughty, melodramatic place.
Yeah.
And with romance, again, it's why I don't attack old lovers, why I don't make snippy asides at people. Is one, it's tacky. Two, the people, the young ladies that I've had in my life, again, all of them wonderful in the moment, and me having just as much blame as them, showing respect for the moment that it was. And one of these poems is called Sex and Sweet Tea. The last 3 hours have been a baldy vacation. In the heat of each other, we howled in our favorite position. Now, we've come to a salty elation. Our dirty dialogue fed your need to devour me, and my sly fingers made you compliant. Age, time, settling. We are none of these. Nor do they dictate to us when to temper our salts on the boudoir. After riot-inspired sex and a few tugs of tobacco, I follow you down the hall for peach-flavored dessert and sweet tea. Between us and our kitchen window, the air is wound up in sandalwood incense. Outside, a lazy summer sun slinks towards the bottom of a soft, red southern sky. Sex and Sweet Tea.
All right. That was almost blue.
Yeah, it was. Oh, that's being a whole other. The Salvation of Cowboy Blue Crawford is another epic poem that I'm sure we'll probably have to address at another time. But it's an animal that has become really a point of even more excitement. Again, when you lose that fun in creating characters, and
right,
I'm trying to find again with my first book and with the Gateman's Hymn of Ignoration, I argued for a time with the publisher on that people just don't want to read a poem that long anymore, when in actuality, one, he said, we're not publishing without it in there. And I said, you know what, that's a great idea, let's put it in there. But now I've had more people ask for me to read from Ignoration than any other part of my first book. And right. With Athena Departs wrapping up, I thought, well, do I need to write another epic? No, I don't want to make that my shtick, because if I come out with another one, I don't want to feel this pressure to write it. Well, in the culmination and the sparking of these ideas, this character, Blue Crawford, began to culminate and became such a much larger piece that I needed to set it off as another book, and that will be hitting the shelves in 2017.
Excellent. And that is interesting, an interesting point, the epic and long poetry in general. I use the term, and I won't say coined it, because I don't think I did, but I cannot find where I must have got it from. But I say American short poem, because when I lived in Europe, I noticed like a lot of the American poets, compared to what I would deem as more traditional writing styles, we write shorter poems. There's the American short poem. It's just a blurb now.
Yeah.
I think it's akin to original rock and roll. You know what I mean? The 2-3 minute song. And it is interesting. I take note of it. Like with your work, you do write some poems longer, and like you're talking about to do an epic. It is, at least this side of the pond, I'll say, it's not really fashionable, is it?
No, and I think that it's in that same void, that gap where, like, sound bites is another idea. Like, I'll have some poems that are just that one little instance, like, isn't that neat? Or isn't that quirky? Or I wonder why they did that. And then they're more travel-inspired, lifelong moments like relationships or friendships or an addiction problem or a step back towards faith, spirituality. It could be good, it could be bad. But I think that people, again, they kind of get run down with these Ramon type, very, very, very to the point, very, very good, very poignant poems, but they want to kind of relax in something. Maybe have that same feeling that they have in a novel where it's like, they have different characters involved and then trying to bridge that gap between, prose and poetry where you have the verse there that you have to, I found the longer you have a poem, the tighter you have to keep it. But in that practice, you develop these characters in a way that has a melody there that brings people along where it's almost as if you embed a soundtrack within your verse. And so again, with Cowboy Blue Crawford being more of a modern day Western that I'm trying to bring to fruition now, it's not like I'm trying in that act to revive something or to stand upon something. We need to have this back, because when you do that, you alienate people. Like, well, I don't really
absolutely.
like
Yeah, absolutely. But just in nature, it does lend to a classical idea. Do you know what I mean?
Very much so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're running low on time. Let's plug some stuff. Athena Departs will be out soon. The Draw of Broken Eyes and Whirling Metaphysics is out. The Southern Collective Experience, people can visit the website online, right? Yeah, and that's where they'll find the Blue Mountain Review. People could submit for future issues.
Yes, sir.
What am I leaving out? The radio show.
Oh, yeah, we're playing the first episode that went live in November of last year, soon on WYYZ, and of course you can keep up to date with all of this off the website at www.southerncollectiveexperience.com. All the issues of the Blue Mountain Review will be there, including issue 2 that comes out the first or second week of February of this year, where the collective is reading, and some of the new developments that are coming there will all be on the hub there of our website, with WUTC in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that's affiliated with NPR. That next show will be the last Sunday of January between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m.
Excellent. All right. Well, so it's always a pleasure, and it's always good to have you on the show.
It's an honor. It's always an honor.
Everyone, my guest tonight is Charles Clifford Brooks. This has been Spectrum.
Join us here on Spectrum with your host, William S. Tribell. Each week, a different guest will join William for a chat on Spectrum.